Hey, Shalom Akim, Yahweh, Bashim, Yahushai, Bashim Kakadash, the wonders and salutations to the elders and apostles, greetings to rule well. Salutations to the hopeful elect throughout the four corners of the earth, holding on in sincerity and in truth to the gospel of the Mashiach Yahushai in these days and times. Brother Menashe, DC Camp, short lesson for the elect. Just to be sincere is one thing in this ministry, man. That has to be long lasting. You have to be honest about the path of prophecy. And now you see that Edom, Edom, the so-called white man's empire has been dominating the four corners of the earth, and it's becoming evident, who the Edomites are, by a process of elimination, all right? And then you begin to understand that, the world is in the grasp of the Edomites, man. That's just how it is, and and then you talk about this conflict over there in the Middle East. The Iraqis still have to deal with their economy being in the stranglehold of Esau, and then Venezuela too, and then you have to think about the South American nations, just in Latin America, all right, just to keep it simple. Then you have Africa. That's just what it is. They're in the hands of of the Edomites. From the top to the bottom, from A to Z. So you just gotta realize, man, that it's tough. It's tough. Not losing your cool when you see all this, and then. You look at the title of the video, it says how the U.S. still controls Iraq's oil money. Okay, so they have set up a scheme where all the proceeds from the oil transactions is stored in a treasury account, a treasury bank in New York. Treasury account. Same thing with Venezuela. All the flows and all that stuff, has to be passing through America's financial system. The international bankers' financial system, and it just shows you, man. That Esau has a muscle, to back up, his claims, to hold people hostage, to hold the economy of a so-called sovereign nation hostage. Yeah, so just play the video real quick. There's nothing wrong with understanding how the oppressor operates.
One of the richest oil fields in the world is in southern Iraq. It's called Majnoon, which means crazy in Arabic. But what's equally crazy is that the revenue from this oil field and others like it is controlled by the United States. America doesn't own them. It doesn't pump the crude, but more than 2 decades after its invasion, it retains influence over Iraq's most important source of income. This has real-world consequences for Iraqi politics and the economy, and on how Baghdad balances domestic interests with U.S. expectations. After the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the U.S. imposed a new financial structure on energy revenue, mandating that proceeds from oil and gas sales be paid into the Development Fund for Iraq, or DFI. The fund was based at the New York Federal Reserve Bank, so Iraqi oil revenue remained outside Iraq. The DFI eventually became an account of the Central Bank of Iraq. Legally, this money belongs to Iraq, but operationally it continues to pass through American financial and regulatory systems.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the French were doing to those French-speaking African countries, man. You know, they have their so-called national account, you know, offshore in the banks in France. So that's the same old colonial mindset, man. So the earth is still under the colonial rule of Esau. You know, colonization is no joke, man. It just shows you who the dominating power is. And hey, you know, Second Ezra, you know, makes it clear who it is. You know, so I read from the scripture, Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 5. Yet also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. You see that? Neither keepeth at home. Always got to be in charge of the financial management of other countries' activities. You know, who enlargeth his desire as hell and is as death and cannot be satisfied. So yeah, when you have the vibration of death managing your economy, what do you expect in return? Death. You know, that's what it is, man. Under the shadow of death. That's why, you know, the loss of life on Earth is just, you know, horrible. You know, so horrible. There is no stability. When there's no stability, you're gonna have casualties. You know, and that's what's going on, man. You know, what's really going on is a reflection of the leadership upon the face of the earth and cannot be satisfied, all right? So there's nothing the countries of this world can do to satisfy this Edomite's appetite, man. They can never have enough. You know, they just want to keep on taking. Because I just saw the video of the president from Brazil, Lula da Silva, you know, over there in South America, complaining about this colonial interest, man. They just keep taking minerals, taking resources, take. You know, they take from Africa, they take from South America. You know you know that democracy don't even exist anymore, man. The same people shouting for democracy are not supporting it, man. You know, they're undermining it. You know, that's just how it is. Undermining democracy. Why they dig for your gold? They dig for your silver. They take. You know. And then it says, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. So that's the mindset of the Edomite man. You know, the people don't have no breathing room. You know, to have a say in the direction the country has to go. So that's just something that the Lord will have to resolve because, you know, Esau's time is almost up and he's on a rampage. You know, he's on a rampage to force compliance.
Meaning the US controls the financial plumbing through which Iraqi oil revenues flow. On paper, this doesn't violate Iraqi sovereignty, but in practice, it gives the US a semi-permanent hold on Iraq's economy. From the start, the spending of these funds was plagued by poor oversight. Between 2004 and 2007, the US Department of Defense did not properly account for $2.6 billion of the $9.1 billion, nearly a third of Iraq's oil revenue for that period. That's according to the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction. It also found that the remaining more than $6 billion was poorly managed. Not just administrative negligence, it set a precedent that Iraq's own revenues could be administered outside Iraqi.
Yeah, so if Iraq is having a so-called episode of mismanagement, how much more in the economy, of America here, where the, the national budget is worth more than the annual revenue of oil that Iraq gets. So you can compare. What countries more prone to mismanagement when you look at both systems. So Israel's system, definitely be prone to more mismanagement, and it's evident. It's evident on the streets of Babylon. You could see it in the so-called criminal justice system. You could see it in the healthcare system, educational system, the financial system, the political system, the so-called judicial system. All that money going to this war machine. It's it just makes people depressed and frustrated. That there is no hope. And there is no hope for this place, man. There is no hope for the folks that put their trust in a debt-based system. It's just about making people sick. There is no joy in this system, to make people feel lively. That's Babylon, always lulling people to be in zombie land, entertainment to the grave, bread and circus.
Institutions. To date, revenue remains in dollar accounts at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, creating a structural dependency. It goes further. Iraqi government reports suggest U.S. officials have warned Baghdad Washington could restrict Iraq's access to oil revenues if Iran-aligned political actors make the Iraqi government. Blocking or delaying access to dollar-dominated oil revenue could cripple the economy. Iraq cannot bypass the US dollar system. Its financial system is dollarized, meaning the local currency's value is pegged, and its central bank and government must comply with US anti-money laundering and sanctions norms to.
Yep. So how easy it is for the MOTB to be introduced, since their currency is pegged to Babylon's financial system. So you just have to understand, man, when this MOTB drama, Mark of the Beast agenda is being pushed, imagine how many countries locked into America's financial system will have to go along with it. So that's the bitter part. The hour of temptation that we all have to overcome.
Access their own money. Analysts say Washington can use this as a bargaining chip in negotiations, particularly when it comes to Iraq's relationships with Iran and domestic militia groups. This is not theoretical. It is leverage rooted in Washington's regulatory authority over the global financial system. There's an important distinction here, as the US does not own Iraqi oil fields. US companies do not control production or export volumes, and Iraq remains responsible for signing oil contracts and setting output through its national institutions. The leverage is financial and regulatory, not military occupation or seizure of assets, and it gives the US a chokehold over Iraq's core national revenue stream. It's also a tool of geopolitical pressure which can be used to influence how Baghdad balances relations with Tehran, Moscow, and domestic political coalitions. In Russia, the US is trying to control the oil, making it harder to sell and less profitable. In Venezuela, the US effectively holds the oil. And in Iraq, the US holds the money from the oil.
Warning. Don't believe the AI trading hype until you watch this entire video. Hi, I'm Lane.
Yeah, so that's the drama, we all have to deal with. But anyway, that's the summary of this lesson. Apparatus have been edified, and hey, just keep your eye out, man. This geopolitics drama, man, it's no joke, and you just gotta wait, for that escalation of the conflict, to happen, sooner or later, inshallah.